Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. The concept of diversity and inclusion has been a hotly debated topic within the games industry for the past decade due to the arguments surrounding forced diversity and inclusion that results in one-dimensional characters with little or no depth or personality outside of immutable factors such as skin color, gender identity, race, or preference in who they like to diddle. On one side, there are the game's journalists, developers, and narrative consultants that focus on DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, and those that support them from a political or ideological standpoint. A group that is commonly referred to as being, quote, woke. Where on the other side of the argument are by and large gamers, or fans of pop culture, who are very much against what is perceived to be and treated as a woke agenda. Now, I will freely admit I have viewers that follow me that will clearly be divided against each other in regards to this topic, as it is a topic that does contain an inherent amount of politics. So I definitely do not expect everyone to agree with me, but then again, that is also nothing new. This channel has never been an echo chamber on either side of whatever political things are happening, nor would I wish it to be. However, I will do what I must and continue to do my best to be factual and objective. So firstly, how did this entire subject of Gamergate 2 get started? Well, after spending several days digging back through, I found that a great deal of culture war content creators had been covering Sweet Baby Inc. or SBI back in October, November, and December of 2023, calling them out for being a DEI consulting company which did direct a fair amount of vitriol their way on social media. But as with everything, the topics were discussed, covered on YouTube, and culture war channels moved on, seemingly taking their audiences with them. However, on Steam, the user Cabrutus decided he didn't like the idea of giving money to games that had hired Sweet Baby Inc. to consult on them, and so, taking inspiration from the Steam Curator group De Novo, which is what Cabrutus verbally confirmed during an interview with Asmongold, Cabrutus created the Steam Curator SBI Detected, and set about adding video games to the Curator list that Sweet Baby Inc. had consulted on. Of the 16 games on the list, 10 of those were confirmed by SBI's own website. That is until SBI removed several of the games listed from their website, and the SBI Detected had to update their game list to include web archive links instead of simply linking to the website itself. But at some point in time, Chris Kindred of Sweet Baby Inc. either found or was directed to the SBI Detected Steam Curator and did what seems to be an all too common tactic these past several years for the truly butthurt. Chris Kindred chose to weaponize the internet to mass flag not only the Steam Curator itself, but Cabrutus's personal Steam account as well, because a cornhole cake just isn't complete without a little bit of fuck you and the horse you rode in on icing on top of it. Now, there is precisely zero evidence that the SBI Detected Curator account or Cabrutus harassed Chris Kindred or SBI. Just so we're clear, talking about someone where they would have to go out of their way to see or hear it is not harassment. Simply making a list of games so people can choose whether or not to spend their money is not harassment. But what Chris Kindred did, that was targeted harassment against a Steam user and a Steam group, not only violating Steam terms of use, but violating Twitter terms of use as well. And as such, Chris Kindred's weaponization attempt was removed by Twitter, or X, or whatever you want to call it, for violating rules surrounding calls for targeted harassment. But people did mass report the Curator and Cabrutus's personal Steam account. And because of the sudden volume of reports, Valve reached out to Cabrutus, who was already making sure that they would be fully compliant with Valve terms of use. Because of that, no action was taken by Valve. But in Chris Kindred's now removed for TOS violations Twitter post, he made some interesting allegations. Firstly, he called it a harassment group, which a list of games is not harassment by any stretch of the imagination. But he said, here's them being slick so they don't get reported. Now, it took some doing, as archive.is tends to be a bit overloaded rather often of late, but I was able to get a hold of the snipped images he posted as his quote-unquote evidence. Firstly, the white image is a snip of Cabrutus's Reddit profile where he stated that he was changing the Curator page to be more neutral to shield himself from bans or reports. The second image is a snip of what Chris Kindred deems to be the evidence that the Curator group is, quote, a harassment group. And it all boiled down to the word tainted, where the Steam user Roachit said, to avoid bans and other complications, instead of wording reviews as tainted, I would just put a generic message of Sweet Baby Inc. was consulted for this game. To which Cabruta stated, "Just changed it, thanks for the suggestion." Now, those conversations took place on February 26th. Chris Kindred's attempt to weaponize SBI fans took place 3 days after that on February 29th, a full 3 days later. Now, this could be taken one of two ways. Those on the side of SBI will take it to mean that they knew what they were doing was wrong and they should be banned regardless. But a more reasonable person would see it to be the group self-correcting. They realized they weren't putting their best foot forward and were taking steps to adjust for that. This was, at the time Chris Kindred made his post, a very small Curator group, not even worth noticing. But Chris Kindred woke up one morning, chose violence, later continued to double down and stated that they should be removed simply because he believed them to be Nazis, which is a very fascistic take to begin with, stating that because he does not agree with their opinions or stance on a topic that they should be denied any ability to speak or even to exist. Regardless of that, Chris Kindred's targeted harassment against SBI Detected was the first proverbial shot that was fired, and Gamergate 2 began. A week after Chris Kindred incited targeted harassment against the SBI Detected Curator group on March 6th, Alyssa Mercante released the Kotaku article titled "Sweet Baby Inc. Doesn't Do What Some Gamers Thinks It Does," with the subheader stating, "No, one company isn't forcing diversity into all your favorite video games." The article itself is highly subjective, lacking a great deal of journalistic standard practices such as verification, objectivity, and even honesty in some areas. In the article, Mercante says, "On March 5th, I managed to spend an hour or so in the Sweet Baby Inc. Detected Discord before I was booted from the space, likely because I identified myself as a Kotaku journalist. In it, members shared posts referencing Feminist Frequency founder Anita Sarkeesian, Marcus Aurelius quotes, and pictures of idealized female bodies in games. But in that, Mercante leaves a few things out. Now, I joined the Discord group and reached out to a moderator who was kind enough to pull all of the posts Alyssa Mercante had made prior to her being removed from that Discord server. And most of them are fairly innocuous. At the very least, I can give her credit for not attempting to hide the fact that she is a Kotaku reporter when she joined the Discord. But she did at one point outright ask, "Is there any reason why many of you don't have your names and pictures associated with your accounts on here?" Now, I know Alyssa Mercante is not as dense as all that. The vast majority of people online are not comfortable disclosing their real-life identities, myself included, but this could be seen as either a casual question or an attempt to see if anyone would willingly dox themselves. Now, I cannot say for certain which of those is true. But given the heavy bias of Mercante's article, especially where she states that those from that Discord who did speak with her failed to provide evidence, the very thing she herself is guilty of within that article, I think it should be fairly safe to say that it was a bit more disingenuous than she leads on. Also within that article, Mercante states that SBI is not a DEI consultancy firm. While their own website, while not outright stating the acronym DEI, it does lean heavily on the concept of diversity and inclusion within their company's mandate with a focus on representation. And from there, the journalists got to work pumping out article after article of disinformation regarding Sweet Baby Inc. and the Curator group SBI Detected. From PC Gamer, a company called Sweet Baby Inc. has become the target of anti-woke gamers because it offers consultancy work and industry standard service that's been normal for years. Consultants, not tyrants. Where zero mention was made of Chris Kindred attacking the Curator group to begin with. Eurogamer, Spider-Man, Alan Wake, ridiculous fishing devs speak up in support of consultancy studio Sweet Baby Inc. after online group claims firm pushing agenda into games it worked on. Again, no mention of Kindred's unprompted weaponization attack against the Curator group in that article. The Guardian, it's 10 years since Gamergate, the industry must now stand up to far-right trolls. No mention of Chris Kindred whatsoever. GameDeveloper.com was even more disingenuous than that in their article, "Why Are Valve and Discord Permitting Harassment Against Sweet Baby Inc." by Bryant Francis, in what appears to be a direct attempt by Bryant Francis to force Valve to take action against this Steam Curator group. Wired's Megan Ferrokmanech, however you say it, I don't care, wrote the article, "The Small Company at the Center of Gamergate 2.0. Montreal-based Sweet Baby employs just 16 people. They now find themselves the targets of gaming's latest harassment campaign." And on it goes, and is still going to this day. Each and every one seemingly deliberately ignoring the fact that it was SBI's Chris Kindred that incited harassment, not SBI Detected. Due to this controversy, the company Take This released the document responding to Gamergate 2, decrying the alleged harassment campaign against Sweet Baby Inc., stating, "If you're reading this, you've probably been hearing about what's now being called Gamergate 2. It's the latest targeted harassment campaign within the game industry, and it's aimed at Sweet Baby Inc., a Montreal-based narrative development studio. The campaign also has been impacting entities and games associated with Sweet Baby, journalists covering the issue, and others associated in various ways with the targets." Now, the research focus conducted by Take This in the past has been undertaken via funding from the Department of Homeland Security. On May 4th, 2023, Take This stated their participation in community resilience research, where they said, "Take This is currently partnered with Middlebury's Center on Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism and Logically AI to research the ways in which extremists exploit digital games spaces." And that fiscal year 2022 grant for just shy of $700,000 awarded to Middlebury Take This and Logically AI stated, "Over the past decade, video games have increasingly become focal points of social activity and identity creation for adolescents and young adults. Relationships made and fostered within game ecosystems routinely cross over into the real world and are impactful parts of local communities. Correspondingly, extremists have used video games and targeted video game communities for activities ranging from propaganda creation to terrorist mobilization and training. Game developers in general, from small, independent studios to billion-dollar multinational corporations, have lagged in awareness of how extremists may attempt to exploit their games and how their communities can be targeted for radicalization. This joint project from Center on Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism, Take This and Logically, seeks to develop a shared framework for understanding extremism in games. This includes the development of a set of best practices and centralized resources for monitoring and evaluation of extremist activities, as well as a series of training workshops for the monitoring, detection, and prevention of extremist exploitation in game spaces for community managers, multiplayer designers, lore developers, mechanics designers, and trust and safety professionals. Now, in addition to that vector of a DHS-funded company backing Sweet Baby Inc. over all this, and the game's journalists seemingly running interference, some old but very familiar names begin to come up as well. In October of 2023, it was announced on the Baby Ghosts website that they were funding Sweet Baby Inc. Now, Baby Ghosts is one arm of Weird Ghosts, both of which are run and operated by two people. The first is Jenny Robinson Faber. The second is Eileen Holowka, the sister of the deceased Alec Holowka. Now, Alec Holowka, if you remember, was one of the developers of Night in the Woods and was targeted by Zoe Quinn under claims of physical and emotional abuse, to the point where Alec Holowka, already in a troubled mental state, ended up taking his own life. The allegations against Holowka by Zoe Quinn were later disproven, and I covered that in a video which I will put a card for at the top of your screen now. Eileen Holowka, soon after her brother's death and while the controversy ensued, released a very inconsistent statement regarding her brother in which "believe all survivors" was uttered numerous times. It is also known that Eileen Holowka and Zoe Quinn remained friends even after Quinn's allegations against Eileen's brother were disproven. That is one of the funding groups for Sweet Baby Inc. Does this have much to do with the Sweet Baby Inc. situation itself? Not directly, no, but tangentially, it speaks a great deal. To boil things down, we have Sweet Baby Inc., a narrative consulting company that focuses on diversity, inclusion, and representation. This company is being run by a known racist who has been supporting what Kindred has been doing. Games journalists have been piling on, being highly disingenuous with their reporting, refusing to acknowledge basic facts, and the initial Kotaku writer seems to be a bit of a racist herself. And then we have at least one DHS anti-terrorism grant-funded company rushing to attack gamers in defense of SBI's actions. We then also have one of SBI's backers being Eileen Holowka, a woman who remained friends with Zoe Quinn, the person who was the initial cause of Gamergate 10 years ago and who literally cancel cultured Eileen Holowka's brother into the grave over false allegations. There's also a great deal of things that were not covered in this video. Statements made by BlackRock over forcing DEI through the ESB rating system, along with a great deal of half-truths, myths, and misconceptions both for and against Sweet Baby Inc., along with other people in the games industry literally threatening to blacklist anyone who goes against the prevailing narrative being attempted to be pushed that Sweet Baby Inc. is the victim. But SBI and Chris Kindred are not the victim in this. Chris Kindred specifically is the aggressor, and the sentiments building up regarding forced inclusion, representation, and check-the-box diversity as opposed to real diversity has set the stage for what is now being called Gamergate 2. And it follows a lot of the same themes right down to old players of the first Gamergate coming right back around once again, the intellectually incestuous nature of games journalism, and the intellectually dishonest of the ideologically driven on both sides of the argument. Now, as many of you are aware, the goal of my channel has always been consumer advocacy within the games industry, whether that be in the role as a games critic, industry commentator, or industry pundit. As such, I very rarely, if ever, side with developers or publishers unless their actions are decidedly pro-consumer, honest, and ethical. The actions of Chris Kindred, Kim Belair, Games Media, Sweet Baby Inc., and the companies and businesses, particularly those businesses that are government funded, such as the DHS funding Take This, crawling over each other to support SBI, and in many cases directly lie about either the situation or about SBI's involvement in games, are about as far removed from honesty and ethics as humanly possible. I'm not one for agendas. I never have been. And the insertion of ideologically driven beliefs within video games is something that has been going on for a very long time. But to discuss that more fully would take a full series worth of videos. But we have for a while now been within a period of this industry where the opinions of the investor far outweigh the opinions of the customer, of the consumer. And as long as that trend continues, the unending wave of ideological narratives being pushed within games, the broken and barely functional products at launch, the absolute degradation of games will continue owing to the simple fact that better than 90% of the gamers out there refuse to speak with their wallets. Oh, they'll decry the evil, they will bemoan the broken and buggy releases, and then they will simply turn around and buy the game in question regardless. SBI Detected is but one more avenue that would allow people to better speak with their wallets, and that is something that the ideologically driven cannot abide, because other forms of protest are seen as merely engagement to them. Engagement that they can also farm for both their pockets and for their unending victimhood narratives and inherent dishonesty. But if enough people were to speak with their wallets, now that would harm them. A games media is a joke. They have directly lied numerous times, have supported SBI and Chris Kindred's attempt at targeted harassment, have supported the racism, and have supported the grift of victimhood culture. If this is to be Gamergate 2.0, I stand with the gamers, and I stand against DEI. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.